The 1980s was a great time for film, especially for this one. Ferris Bueller's Day Off is written and directed by John Hughes, starring Matthew Broderick, Alan Ruck, Jennifer Grey, Jeffrey Jones, amongst many others. It's the story of a kid in high school named Ferris Bueller, hence the title, who's a very popular kid, not just in his school, but also in his hometown of Chicago. Yet he's able to get away with just about anything by skipping school, being truant, leading to a lot of people to worship him just because of how likable he is, trying to avoid his sister and principal, who will do anything to expose him to the public. Ferris Bueller's been one of my personal favorites from the 80s, ever since I was a kid. To say that this movie's iconic would be an understatement. This film has been put into the National Film Registry because of how historically significant it's been culturally also. There's a whole lot that I could say about Ferris Bueller. Hopefully, as I add my own experience to the table. The music, or the iconic scenes where he's lip-syncing to Twist and Shout by the Beatles, or the famous lines that we hear such as "Life moves pretty fast," or
Bueller, Bueller, Bueller.
And there's plenty more where that came from as we go on further in this video. But basically Ferris is pretending to be sick, and he manages to fool his parents, but not so much with his sister Jeannie. And he has a tendency throughout the movie to break the fourth wall by talking to the audience on how to fake being sick and to avoid school, and also with his insights on certain characters and aspects of life that he knows are eventually going to happen as he gets older. Ferris Bueller, I wouldn't say is an ideal role model, basically, because he's able to get away with everything, and it's, at best, morally questionable. But thanks to Matthew Broderick's performance, he comes off as very charming and very likable that you can't really help but crack a smile whenever he's around. And I think it's fair to say that this is Matthew Broderick's signature role. You could talk about him as the voice of Simba in The Lion King, but he will always be Ferris Bueller. Did you see Alien, where that preacher was in that guy's stomach? Freshman. Ferris is the kind of guy that we as the audience would look at and go, I wish I could be like that, because he's so cool and just so likable. And unfortunately, most of us are not, because Cameron, played by Alan Ruck, who is by far my personal favorite character in the film, he's the guy that most of us all are. He's the opposite of Ferris, a very troubled person. From the information that we get throughout the film, he comes from a not-so-ideal home situation, and we never meet his parents. But apparently his parents don't like each other that much, and his father is very overbearing and has a bit of a short fuse too, as he says, remember how insane he went when I broke my retainer? Come on, that's a piece of plastic. This is a Ferrari. And despite the title, Cameron is the heart and soul of this movie. I think his arc is flawlessly executed here because he starts off overly concerned, overly worrying about everything, worried that his father's gonna notice all the little things on the car, but little by little he starts to relax, and thanks to Ferris's nudges, he's able to slowly relax and calm down and grow a bit of a backbone so he can finally stand up for himself. Hey, bada 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 swing bada.
Hey, bada swing bada, Kennedy, swing bada.
But there's also a moment that has a really good subtext to it. When they visit this museum, Cameron looks at this picture of this young girl with her mother. The camera just keeps getting closer and closer to both sides. All the music, no dialogue. Looking at that painting, that child has what he doesn't have. A good family life. And as a result, he views himself as a big void of nothing. It's a riveting moment that I don't really see that many people talk about. And it's another moment where his character starts to shift for the better. And another great character is Ed Rooney, played by Jeffrey Jones, who's very determined to prove that Ferris Bueller is a big, giant facade. And at every chance he gets, he fails miserably. Such as when he gets the word that Sloane's grandmother has passed away, and then he gets a phone call supposedly from her father, and at first he's like, no, this is Ferris Bueller. I'm gonna set the trap right where I want him. And unfortunately, it is a prank by Ferris Bueller, but Ferris manages to pull the rug out from under him and makes him think that he's actually talking to Sloane's father, when he's actually talking to Cameron, who's disguising his voice.
I mean, I didn't think I was talking to you.
And it's one of the funniest scenes, because Cameron is trying to keep this charade going, and Ferris is really eating it up because of how good he's doing, but then he says a few things that Ferris doesn't like, afraid that their cover's gonna be blown. You talk, come on. There's also the scene where he's sitting in his car debating about whether or not he should go out. This ridiculous, okay? I'll go, wait, I'll go. I have to admit, once in a while, I do reenact that scene in my car. A great example of how this movie just really embraces the sense of fun that it has. Like when they sneak into the restaurant when Ferris poses as Abe Froman, the Sausage King of Chicago, when it turns out that it's the same restaurant that his father goes to eat at. Or when Ed Rooney tries to break into Ferris's house in a very Home Alone type of manner and gets chased around by the family Rottweiler and ends up getting kicked in the face by Ferris's sister, who runs away hysterically. And as awful as this sounds, I find that freaking hilarious. And Jennifer Grey is just a miserable and not so happy individual. She's very jealous of Ferris and thinks that Ferris gets away with too much and she never gets away with anything. And thanks to a pep talk from this one character in a police station played by Charlie Sheen, who seemed just as crazy back then as he is now, you should probably worry more about yourself and less about what your brother does. That's just an opinion. And Jeannie in a lot of ways reminds me of my own kid sister, particularly this moment when she runs into Ferris in the car and her mom has no idea what's happening. This little look that they give each other, my sister and I do the exact same thing to each other. That's also my sister and my mom screaming at each other in the car. To my sister, if you're watching this, I am so sorry. I mean that in a loving way. Then there's Rooney's secretary, Grace, played by Edie McClurg, who pulls all these big amounts of pens out of her hair. I don't know where the hell those things come from, but that's just another moment where it's like, what? 1980s was the decade of big hair. Grace! John Hughes also makes a great use of the Chicago location, shot from a helicopter sweeping over the downtown area, basking in all the sights of the skyscrapers in the area. It's beautiful, beautiful imagery. Whenever I think of Chicago, I always think of Ferris Bueller, because that was probably one of the earliest memories I have of hearing about that city. And I have yet to go visit that place. Hopefully one of these days, now that COVID is dying down, I'll be able to travel there and bask in the Chicagoland area. I was able to recognize a few spots too, like the Marina City Towers that you see in the shot of Batman Begins where Batman's standing on the ledge, or the Chicago Board of Trade here, which is Wayne Tower in Batman Begins also, and also the same street that the Joker and Batman face each other in The Dark Knight. And they also do a great job of showing how Chicago feels like a character in and of itself. I love it when movies do that to a certain place, like New York or Philly or LA. Seeing how the people interacting with each other, or how they're having a great time seeing Ferris lip sync to those songs while he's on the float. It's all really good stuff. But inevitably, Cameron is able to come to a sense of realization once he notices that the miles on his dad's car are a lot more than what he expected. He goes into a pretty big catatonic state. And then when he feigns a suicide attempt in the pool and Ferris has to rescue him, it's almost like he's reborn into a new person. Because when they try to take the miles off and it's not working, he finally decides to take a stand and stand up to his father. And the car actually goes out the window and is destroyed. But instead of letting Ferris take the fall, Cameron decides, no, I'll take it. If it wasn't for Ferris, Cameron might not have had a sudden realization. When you take a pause from all the craziness of your everyday routine, you're able to think more clearly and maybe take a more introspective look on certain things in your life. Cameron finally realizes that worrying about everything and being so upset about what his parents are going to think or what everybody else is going to think, it's a miserable way of living, and he's basically done with it. I can safely say that I relate to that a great deal, especially in recent months. When Morris comes home, he and I will just have a little chat. But eventually Ferris, after having a moment with his girlfriend Sloane, is able to escape just by the skin of his teeth and almost gets caught by Rooney, but his sister, who's able to see that Rooney was the one who broke into their house, decides to cover for her brother and allow the family dog to bite him on the ankle, which is so satisfactory. And Ferris manages to get away scot-clean. Nobody is the wiser.
It's over. Go home.
Oh, by the way, Cable's going to show up in the sequel. I really like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I think it's something that you definitely need to see because it's one of those films that is so iconic that even if you haven't seen it, you at least have to know about it because of all the famous lines that come from it. And films by John Hughes, they have a lot of great lessons that you could pull from. This movie is no exception. Those are my thoughts on Ferris Bueller. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are, and I'll see you guys in the next video.